Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, From Silos to Strategy, Third-Party Risk, Vendor Oversight, What's Next? My name is Ethan Bresnahan. I'm the Senior Marketing Director here at CyberSaint, and I am thrilled to be joined by true experts in technology and cybersecurity. Evelyn Anderson is IBM's Distinguished Engineer, and Padraic O'Reilly is the Founder and Chief Innovation Officer at CyberSaint. We're here today because third-party risk is not just a hot topic. It's a growing business risk that's demanding board-level attention. In the wake of high-profile incidents, such as the CrowdStrike and Delta disruptions, TPRM has evolved from a back-office compliance exercise to a strategic imperative. Today, our speakers will explore how forward-looking organizations are rethinking TPRM, not just patching together more tools, but transforming how they manage risk with automation, integration, and real-time intelligence. You'll hear how IBM is using CyberStrong to make that shift a reality, eliminating silos and creating a unified risk picture across the enterprise. With that, we're going to go ahead and dive in, and I will hand things off to Padraic and Evelyn. It's great to have you both here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. A pleasure. Evelyn, again, thanks for joining, and really excited for our conversation here. So welcome, everyone. And I think we'll kick it off, Evelyn, with some questions that take in the broader context. So how has the recent third-party event landscape, like the CrowdStrike outage, impacted the way that enterprises are thinking about TPRM versus their standard approach to first-party risk management?
For us, and especially in talking to our clients, it's really brought it to the forefront. One thing that we've seen is when it comes to third-party risk management, it used to be more of a back office kind of compliance exercise. And we're seeing more and more clients have, it's one of the key factors that they're building into their actual strategic plans. They want to understand and have more visibility into how their vendors, not just the third, but third and nth party vendors, are really impacting them. And what we've seen is when we've been having conversations with clients recently, they've been asking us for our point of view, for recommendations. What are some of the capabilities and innovation we have around this? Platformization is becoming a very key point. One thing when it comes to having to tie multiple solutions together to be able to understand what your risk and compliance situation may be for that account, they're starting to ask us for that. And what are we doing as a whole to be able to support this space is some of the things that we've been seeing.
That's great. And having been in this space for many years now, it does feel like it's coming to a head in some ways, and people are thinking about new ways to go at it, which is fantastic. So from your vantage point, why do so many even mature organizations still struggle with TPRM?
Yeah, we actually started pulling some of the statistics around this. When we talk to clients, we're always trying to understand what are some of their key challenges. And they pointed out a couple of things for us. They talked about the actual ownership is fragmented. No one is really sure who actually owns and is responsible for making sure that they're actually assessing and putting the appropriate controls around this. This is still a very manual exercise in a lot of organizations. They don't have visibility into exactly what's happening across their environment. It's not properly tied into their resilience programs. And so when you think about the business continuity plans and, if you have a service disruption, how do you recover from it? This is one area that they're starting to actually make sure that they're, pointing it out. And one of the other things that we saw was the inability to be able to translate the data, into actual actionable intelligence and tying it into their overarching risk management program.
Yeah, and that last point is huge and really interesting to me, because some of the work we've done with you involves, getting the data sort of harmonized so that you have a unified point of view on this, and you can get away from the historical fragmentation. So in the latest Gartner market guide for TPRM, the research kind of highlights that no single solution supports all use cases. Big surprise there, leading to data silos and overlaps. How do you see that impacting risk decision-making at the enterprise level?
For us, and it's almost kind of funny because this has been the case for a while. It's not really limited to third-party risk management. We see this across the board, across cybersecurity. When we go into, and we're working with our clients trying to help them to implement controls as a whole around cybersecurity risk management, we find that most of them, they may have a GRC solution in place or an IT risk management solution in place. But when you actually start, getting underneath the cover, you realize that they're still using spreadsheets to do a lot of the work to actually feed it in, because a lot of the tools, there's disparate tools, the reporting mechanism, being able to support the data aggregation to actually get it into a centralized point and support it. We're seeing that over and over and over. And if you don't know about everything that's happening across your full ecosystem, then you're not making proper decisions. You're making decisions based off of, inaccurate data. So that's where we're seeing more and more trying to figure out, okay, where do we get that true CISO view that's helping me to understand not only what's happening in, the IT cybersecurity side, but what's happening across the other departments, organizations that may be impacting the IT side.
Yeah, and that's a huge point. That's a great point. I was talking to a CISO recently, and he said the first thing he did when he went in, and it was a major government agency, it was that he sat everyone down, all product owners, everyone who had touched cybersecurity at all, and he said, "Okay, let's draw a big map, from this product to this, to our controls, and to our overall risk." They never finished the project. But, in a way, that translation and that unification of data and breaking down those silos, so important, and definitely applies to TPRM as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the most common signs that a third-party risk management program has become fragmented? And what do you see out there in the field, Evelyn? And how do you diagnose those challenges before they become too costly?
I think you really touched on it. I mean, unfortunately, the first thing that you have to do is begin to understand all of the key players, parts that are connected. We were working with a hospital organization not so long ago where they were asking us to help to build out a cyber resilience program for them. And one of the things that, on the surface, you may not think about, may not look at, but as they built their resilience program, and I was saying cyber, but their overarching resilience program, just because there's you may be outsourcing, just say your laundry, and you think, okay, if they go away and have some delays, no big deal. But that's really not accurate, because you need that laundry in order to be able to have the surgery. There's be able to support that. And so some of the key little simple things that we take for granted and not understanding the overarching impact, we really have to map out from the beginning to end, who is providing what for your organization, where if that actually goes away, whether it's your third, fourth, fifth, nth party, whatever it is, how does that actually impact you? Because, for one of the organizations, and that you may, especially the medical field is an interesting area when it comes to third-party risk management, because they are impacted by other hospitals. So if another hospital goes down, what's that impact? And so when we start looking at the third party and risk management and how we actually guide and instruct, there's a lot of little bitty niches and pieces that you have to take into consideration.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great example of how everything can sort of grind to a halt if you don't look at all the pieces in the puzzle. So, Evelyn, can you maybe walk us through how IBM Consulting approaches third-party risk program transformation today, especially in the wake of these major vendor-related incidents? And are there initiatives that CISOs and teams that are prioritizing today that they didn't used to?
We start off literally from an IBM perspective is just trying to connect the dots, like where you mentioned the CISO coming in and trying to map out, how are all of the pieces connecting. We start from an advisory perspective, and we utilize our own IBM Garage methodology, which is enterprise design thinking. And what we're trying to do is go through a full spectrum of every single system that is associated, understanding who are who owns it, who makes the decision on it? Are there any feeds into that could actually have an impact? And then of course we work with our ecosystem partners such as yourself to find out for each of those systems, how can we automate the process? Are there capabilities that you bring to the table, as an example with the CyberStrong program, that we can, when it comes to the vendors actually filling out a questionnaire, when they provide us with their SOC 2 Type 2 attestation, how do we actually automate and ingest that information as a whole, so we can understand where they may have gaps that can potentially impact us even on how they're managing their systems. And then from an IBM perspective, we're also trying to identify ways with our own Watson X on how we can build out accelerators to do some of the analysis and going through the program. We also look at, from an industry perspective, what is the industry actually telling us for that particular area? What are some of the leading practices that should be considered? Are there any specific regulations that can potentially have an impact? So we're really kind of looking at a full spectrum of controls, starting from the smallest to, number one, just going through the basic due diligence and understanding what's in place today, what's working well, what's not working well, and building from there.
It's great. You really do have to level set in some ways and understand the nature of the problem. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed working about you all, is how much experience you bring to bear in the market when it comes to dealing with large enterprise clients. Complexity is always an issue there, and but you guys have a very sure hand when it comes to dealing with those things. So what, from your perspective, Evelyn, what stood out to you about the CyberStrong platform, our product that made it the vendor of choice for IBM's ARC solution?
And thank you for asking. So when we actually had a vendor showcase back in the end of last year, and we had a full layout of all of the capabilities and services that IBM support as a whole. Our goal was to, instead of going out and building everything, we wanted to understand what was already out there in the market, where there was, vendors that may have extra, very strong capabilities in different fields. And when we assessed, and something that was a bit more lightweight. So we know some of the stronger GRCs provide this capability, but some of the small, medium companies can't afford the Rolls Royce. So we were trying to find something that would be able to accommodate all of the business types. And there was a couple of things that we saw. You guys played in multiple spaces. You were able to support the continuous controls monitoring, where we know that clients are still struggling with this, with the influx of regulations and frameworks that are coming out across the board. We also knew you guys provided support around vulnerability management, which was another area that a lot of our clients are looking for. And then when we started looking at the risk management, it was definitely a plus, because you were supporting both the qualitative as well as the quantitative analysis. You were able to, perform the assessment and support it across the whole spectrum. And one of the biggest things that we see that's coming in quite frequently is you also supported the actual industry benchmarking. And where our clients are asking us, okay, where do we measure against these other, providers that are providing the same services? And so when we looked at that as a whole, and with the autonomous risk and compliance solution, which is our new Gen AI solution that's able to perform, any type of an assessment, where you're able to ingest documents, your questionnaire, and it's able to do the auto reasoning and analysis and provide a response. And we've already been able to set up the API to ingest that information into CyberSaint. And so that was a huge plus for us, because a lot of that work was back to the spreadsheets, where people are taking them and, ticking off the box, and then you're trying to figure out how to get that content in. So that was a huge plus for us as well.
Yeah, and you're talking about one of my, and thank you for relating what you saw in us. We've been around for a bit, and a lot of what we do comes through talking to clients. Yes. It comes through talking to actual clients. And I was a consultant, in the field a bit before I did this, and questionnaire, automation and the ingestion, what Watson X is doing on ARC is really, really powerful. we have a lot of customers and clients who have been drowning under questionnaires for years. And I've seen customers that have one individual maybe parked on 800 assessments a year, and they're killing that individual.
Yes.
Like, they're literally killing that human. And they will say, frankly, they're not going to last. And I'm like, well, what's your plan? You're going to find another person with another set of spreadsheets. So this is, that what you were talking about just there is very powerful. And the point of integration has been very rapid. And I really, really have enjoyed seeing this go to market with you guys.
I'm glad you even mentioned that, because one of the things that we saw with some clients, we spoke to a client earlier this week, and they explained that, okay, yes, we're getting the results, but it's starting to feel like it's a rubber stamp, because the results never change. And so where you have that one person reviewing over and over and over, you have to start wondering if they're just if they're really doing a full, thorough review manually. Yeah. Or if it's, well, it was the same, I doubt this changed, and just browsing over. And so that's one of the other things that we saw. I mean, when you're performing things manually, there's going to be errors, there's going to be mistakes, and the delay. In the long run, when you are able to add in some innovation, automation, it definitely improves your risk and compliance posture as a whole. So.
Yeah, and automation is really advanced. Control automation and questionnaire automation has really, really, in the last 2 years, it's really sped up. And I think executives are finally understanding that they can't go forward without automation. You can't drive, a giant vessel atop a pile of spreadsheets. It's just not going to work. So, to that point, how can the real-time visibility, as we get more automated data into assessments, how can it improve TPRM teams, and how does that visibility play into improving relationships with other teams across the program and the enterprise at large?
Funny enough, almost every client that we work with, this is kind of one of their big asks. That they're always asking, how do we bridge the gap? How do we get to where, if you can't give me real time, give me near time? And that's one of the things that we've been trying to do, and partnering with the various vendors to be able to give them that near to real time, where we can drive the automation, where we can actually set this up to where it's running daily. Being able to pull in the feeds, being able to pull in all of your compliance telemetry, your vulnerability scans, and being able to report on it. We've seen that a lot of times, it's just like any of us. If we make a decision, if I want to bake a cake and I'm missing, key ingredient, sugar, something's going to come out of the oven, but it's not going to be right. And that's one of the things that we've seen when it comes to organizations, is they want to make sure that the decisions that they're making, the investments that they're making across the board, that it is the right decision, and they can't do that without the right information. So that's one of the areas that is very critical, and it's having a huge impact. And I mean, we've seen that from recent reports on how third-party vendors are really, it's come to the forefront. When we attended a couple of the security conferences this year, it was amazing how third-party risk management was the #1 discussion within our area, where clients were asking us, hey, what are you doing in this space? How can you help us? Do you have automation? And we've seen that over and over at every security conference we've attended this year.
Right. Yeah, and I've seen it too. I would agree. It's really come to the fore, and it's in the data too. So if you look at the actual, events themselves, the third-party loss events have ticked up substantially. So it's good that people are noticing that and prioritizing it. Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
So many organizations still rely on survey-based assessments and static data. What does a modern, intelligent third-party risk management platform really look like today? And what's really driving the evolution?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think we've been sort of dancing around it. What's driving the evolution is, this has become a key risk for the business. And it's understood as such, right? So if cyber is an existential risk, TPRM is about a third of the pie of that existential risk. So that people are waking up to that. I remember being at NIST in 2018. Ron Ross published a supply chain, document, and he went around the room saying supply chain is hot, and people were kind of giggling.
Mhm.
But in some ways, supply chain was hot then. But it's taken maybe 7 years for
Yes.
that to sort of trickle into the forebrains of the executives, which is fine, but it's here now.
Mhm.
So what does it look like? Well, it doesn't look like the splintered landscape as we were talking about that we have, right? Which is, some back office work,
Mhm.
some crazy products that, make some outrageous claims around benchmarking complex networks.
Mhm.
What it does is it looks at all the elements of the practice now,
Yeah.
and brings some innovation after you've understood some of the factors in play. So it really does take a sure hand and an experienced group of people to sort of look at that and suggest ways forward. From my eyes, I'm really excited because we've made so many advancements in automation lately, in particular with you all. So you've got more data. You've got more data that you can harmonize and bring to the problem, and really improve the quality of the output and socialize to the executives what the exposures look like without sort of recreating the problem. So there's been a lot of innovation in this space, and using some of the first party
Mhm.
techniques on this problem.
Mhm.
Third party ran off into the woods kind of in a way and said, I'm my own thing. A
Yes.
lot of products kind of came in and said, we're totally unique. You can't talk to us, but third party risk is cyber risk,
Yes.
and it has to be understood as such. And cyber risk has been advancing all along.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of good ways to implement, CRQ, risk management. These are well-established practices, well-established models, quantitative and quantitative. So you've got to sort of bring TPRM into the fold a bit.
Yes.
So that's a bit of what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely good. So, and I definitely want to hear this as the founder. So, how does CyberStrong handle continuous monitoring, integration across different domains like cyber compliance, procurement risk? Where other tools tend to kind of fall short. How do you guys play within this area?
Yeah. For us, and my background is in financial modeling before I came into cyber, so I was always a data guy. What I noticed first time I looked at cyber was you had brilliant research all over the place, but it was like a Tower of Babel. No one was talking to each other. You had open source projects that made advancements, but didn't talk to the other open source projects that were also doing this work. So what I also noticed was we had a kind of technology balkanization in cyber. So you had endpoint companies and endpoint data. You had email security companies. You had, DNS. You had all the different types of cyber data, but it hadn't really been translated.
Yeah.
So for me, automation was always a story about how do you aggregate and translate and normalize. And that's, to me, one of the most powerful things I can show a customer is here's an assessment. Here's 5 different sources of telemetry coming in from products. Here it is mapped to controls.
Yes.
And it's updating.
Yes.
So your risk assessment on the back of that assessment is updating. It's in real time. So, historically in our industry, 6 months a risk assessment would be knocking around, right? That would be like a fresh one. So I think driving that data, translating it, getting it together in a data lake, or as you have done in Arc, that's best of class. That's the way to go. Cybersecurity data isn't the same data. Log data isn't, endpoint data isn't, email security data isn't, HR software data. It's not. But you can use translation and you can normalize, and vulnerability data. That's a huge problem we've labored under for almost a generation now. With normalization and the approach you guys are taking, and that's one of the areas I think we were really in sync around getting the data, normalizing it, getting it into the right analytical frameworks so that decisions can be made on it. So that's really how I see some of that.
I fully agree on that one. And you're, I mean, you're so right when it comes to the normalization. I mean, we laugh when we have to. I mean, as a service provider, we're looking at so many different regulations, frameworks, and standards that are out there. And when we did some statistics years back where we saw that on average, each client has to comply with 13 different regulations. And the funny part about it is when you see the information, it comes in so many different formats. So being able to normalize that has been key, is one of the areas that we saw from our clients. I'd also like to understand from you, so how are you seeing the cyber risk quantification reshaping some of the conversations around third party at the board and C-level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think there's been a sea change in the last couple of years, partly driven off of, SolarWinds. The SolarWinds case, I think, is really for the average board member, in this country and internationally, it sort of brought cyber, right up into the enforcement area, right? So the SEC started looking at it. Now, board members are totally, they understand when the SEC is looking at a thing, right? They have financial regulations they report out all the time, and now the SEC was sort of, making some noise around this. If you have risk exposures and you aren't fully apprised, are you exercising due care, right? So this is where board members kind of think about it, and I think they're on the right track. Where we have to help them as cyber professionals is to show them, some of the CRQ techniques that we use, which are really out of finance. They're comfortable with risk modeling, most executives and most board members. But we have to sort of show them how we've related what we do in our practices to the risk models, show them what we mean by the exposures, and then, demonstrate some clear ROI in an empirical, data-driven way. Now, is a board member going to want to see what we've done on the normalization front in the data lakes? And no, they're not going to want to see that. But what they do want to see is, look, half of all ransomware comes in through the supply chain. That's interesting. What do you think our exposures might be to that? What can we do to improve our programs more generally to lessen that exposure? Yeah. Or if we need to be insured a little bit more, how do we understand how much more? How much budget should we devote to all the functional areas of the practice of cyber, and what's the return on investment around that? So I see CRQ as sort of our way of translating what we do into financial terms. And because my background was in financial and macroeconomic modeling, I was comfortable with probabilistic models. That's just, we use them in markets, we use them in banks. We talk about, future losses and present values and, likelihoods and impacts all the time. I think getting cyber professionals a little more comfortable with that has been a journey we've been on, right, for a long time now. And one of the brilliant things about you all is, you're right at the locus of the business and the strategy and the actual nuts and bolts of things, because you're an information company and have been for a very long time. So, I think that's the wonderful thing about this. We're doing some modeling, but we're doing it well, and we're doing it with data, and we're bringing people together. And I think that's, for me, CRQ is really a way to talk about what we're doing, just as controls are a way to talk about what we're doing as well.
Yes, fully agree there. Thank you. Okay.
All right. So just a couple of quick questions, and we've had a pretty robust discussion here, Evelyn. So I just want to sort of, go back to regulation briefly. As the regulatory scrutiny tightens, and we both see this obviously in our day-to-day, especially around fourth-party risk and ESG, what should organizations prioritize in their next generation TPRM roadmaps?
I would start with automation. One of the things that we're trying to do with IBM as a part of the Autonomous Risk and Compliance solution is building out a knowledge corpus. So we know that there's this huge influx of regulations and how you're actually aligning with them and the fines and penalties that we've seen. I don't believe the cost of a data breach report has come out just yet, but it actually goes through and looks at some of the fines that, basing it off of the different countries. When you start looking at things of that nature, what we're trying to do and being a bit more proactive is establish a knowledge corpus that's pulling in all of the regulations, standards, frameworks, across the board around cybersecurity, privacy, data, as well as AI, and establishing that baseline for our clients to help them to prioritize. So, I mean, if I'm going to look and I'm trying to advise someone, the first place that we would always suggest is, understand. I mean, hopefully you have your CMDB in place, but if you don't, we need to understand, what are your critical assets? What are the things that, if something were to happen with one of those third-party vendors, if that service went away, what's the actual impact? So start with the business impact analysis, where you really understand for each of those areas, if whatever shut down today, can you keep the lights on? Can you continue to provide your services? And so that's one of the things that we usually start with is, you have to understand your business, where your critical connections are, and start there from a prioritization, and try to drive automation. I mean, some of the biggest things and impacts across most organizations, we don't really take into consideration how much time is invested in going through and trying to normalize all that data.
Yeah.
And so when you can automate some of those, little small things, it looks like a huge investment on the front end, but when you start looking at the human, costs that you have for that, it really normalizes itself.
Yeah, those are all great points. We have some questions lining up here, so I think I'll just transition a little bit to a few of our questions. And one of them is from someone who knows us both. So great to see you too, Rafi. How do you calibrate the cyber risk analysis conclusions to convince upper management and business to justify the recommended actions in a credible manner? This big question. It's the religious question, right?
Yeah. We talk about, one of the things that we started looking at from an IBM perspective is, where we look at the operating model and looking at your 3 lines of defense. What we noticed is most organizations will focus, especially on the cyber side, the IT side, we focus on the technical aspect of it. We don't take the time to identify the metrics, the details, and put it in a plain, English type of format, so that when you're having that conversation with your CISOs, with CIO, with your financial officers, and you're trying to convince them that you absolutely need this widget, this capability in order to be successful, that's one of the things that we start stressing, is making sure that you have those dashboards that you can show with them and highlight the impact. And that's where the business impact analysis comes in. If we don't do X, this is what can possibly happen. And I think that's one of the areas that there tends to be a gap between the technical side and the leadership, that we have to bridge that gap.
Absolutely. Yeah. And here's one from someone in-house at your organization. So from David Odalara, is it sufficient to rely on scores based on scans and public information, or should assessments be made mandatory? The challenge is that third parties are not always able to respond to questionnaires. What is the best way to manage this issue?
Well, this is one thing. When we actually set up services with a lot of vendors, one thing that we have asked, when you start asking them for their report, their data, or access into their system, so you're not relying on what they're giving you and what they're saying, but you're getting true information from those systems. And one thing that we've seen is when we, establish those initial contracts, a lot of those vendors are leery and don't want to give you the details. They're giving you a report, and there's no way for you to determine if it's accurate, if it's not. And so we've seen that as still one of the obstacles that we have to overcome, and trying to, map out what's the best approach. So for us, that's still one that we're trying to overcome. But I think it's critical for us to be able to map and pull that in. I don't see the question. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I want to make sure I answered that. And Padraic, please add to, and I'm looking at the question, but please add to, any comments you may have in this area.
Yeah. I've known one of the question askers for quite a long time, and
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, but I didn't know you were showing up here today. To me, I think we covered a little bit of it around the cyber risk quantification. It's really business impact is very similar. So it's basically saying if we don't do a thing, right, what could be the cost to us of not doing that thing? You need an analytical framework to make those cases, right?
Mhm.
And again, the reluctance again in the industry we see around maybe going to a partner and saying, I'd like some real-time information about your systems. There's still some friction there for sure. But I think as to my way of thinking about it is the more information you get, the more efficient the outcome is. And I think that case is going to be made as automation advances. So I think some of the resistance you're seeing still around allowing certain kinds of information to come in, aside from a self-assessed questionnaire, which we all know can have some biases cooked into it, right? Everyone tends to score themselves well. It's the rare individual who scores themselves accurately. It's just human nature, right?
Mhm.
So some of those things are still in play, but aggregating more and more information, doing it efficiently, and getting it into the analytical frameworks it has to be in to help executives make those decisions, hugely important. And you guys are driving a lot of innovation in this area. I've seen the solution you've come up with, and we've integrated, which and it's a thing of beauty to my way of thinking, because it really helps teams get out of that
Mhm.
isolated, siloed approach. It brings the information together, and it brings it into the century we're actually in. Risk assessments that are languishing and old and moldering and not containing fresh information. They're not as useful as we all sort of pretended they were for a long time. So, Evelyn,
Yeah.
great discussion. Yeah. Do you have any other points to conclude with?
Yeah, just to kind of add to on the question that David was asking, where he was mentioning that some of the third parties weren't always able to respond to the questionnaires. One of the things when we actually set up our contract and with third party vendors, I mean, that has to be something that's listed as a part of the contract, because there's really never a scenario where the third party vendor should not be able to answer the questionnaire. No. If they're providing services, that is a must. That they have to provide that, and most of them are depending on the services they're providing, they have to align with the type 2 attestation. That gives us some insight, and if we're able to actually pull the scans data directly from their systems, so as Patrick mentioned earlier, they're not actually making themselves look better than what they really are. That's even better. And so it's one of the things that, this is an area that, unfortunately, it's not as if it was just created, but it's one that is shining a light across all industries where we're seeing the importance of it. So, all of us will continue to mature the process as we continue forward. But this is definitely an area that, we're going to see a lot of traction over the next year or so.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And from working with you all, I see it in action, and I'm very optimistic about where this is headed. We've made great strides, our companies together and the industry generally as well. And answering questionnaires should be table stakes if you're going to do business, So I totally agree with that. All right, Evelyn, wonderful conversation. I think we covered a lot of ground. We learned a bit, and I'm going to end it there. Everyone who attended, really thank you. Thank you for your excellent questions, and look forward to the next time we all meet again.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks. You too.